Okay, welcome to my bijou workshop. Today I'm going to show you how to mend an XLR cable. There's that time where you've got a box full of cables and, oh, it doesn't work, mate, or something like that, and that needn't be, because actually they're quite simple things. Now, you have a male end, which goes into your mixing desk or your input, and then the female end, which goes into your mic or output device. So usually it's a mic, and when there's a mic on the end of this connector, the end of the female connector here, it's subject to all sorts of strains, you know, cables being wound round the stand, and then you get the joker at the gig that does that with a mic, and that's not very good. That will break all the connectors. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to chop the cable about 2 inches below the XLR connector, just lop straight through it, because the problems are usually here, and you can tell if you've got a cable tester, you can sometimes tell. But if in doubt, just chop the 2 inches off at there, and that should should find the fault. So I'm going to take this part off, and then just pushing through the XLR. Some XLRs are manufactured differently, but the components are basically the same. You get a strain relief, and then a case which helps squash the cable in, and then you get the connector itself, and then a bit of metal housing. So there are your component pieces. Now, before I start, I'm going to put this final piece on the new cable. Very often it's extremely easy to solder up something and then find you haven't put the bits on that need to screw up together. So I'm going to put that piece on as well. There we go, and there's our pieces there. Now there are 3 wires showing here. There's a red one, a blue one, and then this one, which is plain copper, but you can see it's been covered in solder, but there's a little bit of copper at the end there. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to memorize the positioning of these cables so that when I put the new piece on, they're the same. Pin 1, you can see the numbers here. 1 is there, 3 is at the top, and then 2 on the right here. Pin 1 is always the ground wire, which is the one that has no coloured plastic sheathing. So that's easy. If you know that pin 1 is ground, all you need to do is remember one of the others, and then there's one final position. So blue goes at the top. So I'm going to get my soldering iron now. I'm just going to put a little bit of solder, just going to tin the end. It's important that you do that, and then the soldering iron is at the correct temperature. Now I'm going to let the ground wire come off first because it's shorter. That just protects the cables there, look, because this one is thicker than these. So I'm just going to take that one off there and that one off there. It's worthwhile practicing holding the connector between your middle and annular fingers like that, and just gripping it, and then you can use your thumb and forefinger to feed the cables, and it's much quicker than using a vise. So I'm just going to make sure that all the buckets here, the cable buckets where the cables go, are free from any little nasties. Notice the 4th one in the middle there, that isn't a connector, it's actually a part of a spring, just to keep the thing in place. So I'm going to put that to one side for a second. So I've got my red, blue and ground, and that's what I need to try and make from this. So I'm just going to quickly take about 1 inch of the cable and just strip it back. You can use commercially available wire strippers. I haven't got one, I just use the back of a pair of cutters. There we go. And then I just press that. There we go. Now that's what I'm left with. You can see there's a bit of a mess there. It's a lot of clear copper wire. And I have to get all those strands together. You can see that there are bits of material there as well. They are there to aid flexibility and the strength of the cable. Some cables have them, some do not, or they have slightly different materials. But anyway, we need to get all the copper in one place. And there it is. Oh, there's a couple of stray ones out. And it's really important to get all the copper out, because actually these mic cables also can carry something called phantom power, which is 48 volts. It's quite a high voltage, and that actually supplies some microphones with power. So I'm just going to cut the material away. Now you can see that I've got just the copper here, and it's sort of a vague semblance of form, and then I've got the blue one and the red one. So with the copper I'm going to twist it together. Quite, you know, twist it really, really thoroughly so that you end up with one line of copper. Now, I'm going to just drop some solder onto that now. It's very important that you do this, that you actually put solder on the wire. So I'm just going to brush the solder. I used to put the solder underneath the wire as well, so that the solder melts its way through that entire cross section of wire. There we go. Now I'm going to just strip back a tiny bit from the blue and the red. So I'm just going to take a little bit off that. If you're clever, you can do them both at once, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not clever. There we go, taking a tiny bit off. You don't need very much at all, because actually when you solder these wires, the heat of the soldering iron will actually melt the coloured plastic very slightly and actually end up with slightly more cable showing. If I to demonstrate that, so here comes the red one. There we go, and the blue one. Now we've got our 3 cables. Now, as before, when I took the mic connector apart, there was a shorter ground wire, so I'm just going to cut that. It just means that you've got a way of protecting the smaller wires by using the thicker one as a kind of a tug of war, just to prevent anything coming out. So once again, pin 1, which is this one here, that's going to accept the ground wire. Now I'm going to put the other signal wires on first, because it's easier to put the ground wire on with bending these than trying to bend these to fit. So if you see what I mean. So pin 3, there's your blue wire. Just hold it there as long as you can. That's it. And you can see the solder drying. And then the other one. There we go. There's those 2 wires on there now. And then I'm going to just bend the wires slightly in order to offer the ground wire up to pin 1. There we go. Now there is your newly refurbished mic connector, and I'll just pull the cables very briefly just to make sure that everything's there. Now I'm going to put the strain relief section on. There we go, just join that onto the XLR. You might have to just jiggle it slightly just to work it over those cables. And then I'm going to get the end of it. You can see that there's a notch out of the XLR connector and a corresponding lug there. I'm just going to slip that over there. There we go, that's pushed into place. And then lastly, the strain relief comes up to here. There we go. Now I've got a cable tester here. They are very useful. They're only 20 quid or something. And it's this little device here where you can plug any connector in one side and the corresponding other end of the cable into the other side, and then the lights tell you what's happening. So I'm going to put the newly refurbished connector in there. I'm going to get the other side, which is the male end. I'm going to put that in here. Now the lights that you're seeing here should correspond vertically. So pin 1 is connected to pin 1 on one end and the other end. You can see these arrows here. And then hopefully pin 2 and 2, yep, pin 3 and 3. So there we go. Now on the end that I've just fixed, I just wiggle it about slightly, just wiggle the cable, just to make sure that those lights are absolutely solidly on. And there we go. There is your finished microphone connector. And that took me, what, 8 minutes, I suppose? Something like that. Or whatever time you can see on YouTube. So an hour will sort out all your dodgy cables and save you about 200 quid. And there we go.